Hello and welcome to Nature Knowledge. This is a speaker series with experts sharing scientific knowledge on current issues affecting nature in Florida. I'm your host, Dr. Shelly Johnson, State Specialized Agent in Natural Resources with University of Florida IFAS Extension. Thanks for joining us today.
So we'll go ahead and get started with our topic. This is my title, so hopefully it's okay for the speakers. We're going to talk about bees in Florida and actually several different aspects about that. And I want to welcome Amy Vu, Dr. Rachel Mallinger, I don't want to say your name wrong, and Cuda. They're from the Department of Entomology and Nematology here at the University of Florida. So I am just going to throw it over to you all, and I don't know which order you're going in, but I'll just let you maybe introduce yourselves as we go.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me? I'll go ahead and introduce us. Great. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen real quick. Oh, there's my dog.
I'll just chime in real quick. I'm already seeing, I forgot to mention, I will be recording this.
Great.
And
okay.
So I'll be posting that online for people. People are already asking that, so go ahead, sorry.
All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Amy Vu, and I'm the Extension Coordinator at the University of Florida Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory. You all should be able to see my screen here that I've shared with you. We'll probably change the name of the presentation that Shelly gave to us, since I'll be speaking a little bit about the Asian giant hornet, which a lot of you probably know of as the murder hornet. I think Dr. Mallinger is going to be talking to us about other types of bees, so we won't really specifically be talking about honeybees today. And then Dr. Cuda is going to talk to us a little bit about invasive species. So that's kind of, we all figured that we'd give you a little 10-minute synopsis of some of the stuff going on and maybe things that you did or did not know, and I promise you they all tie together somehow. So at the end of this, if you decide, you know, what in the world and why are all three of them together talking about these random things, hopefully by the end of it you will see that it is a very interesting and complicated insect world out there. So I did want to talk to you just real quickly, and I think the way we'll do this is I'll just go through my presentation. Dr. Mallinger can go through hers, Dr. Cuda can go through his, and then at the end we'll just do all the questions if that's okay with everybody. All right, so I just had to brag a little bit about the lab. So myself, so Dr. Mallinger and Dr. Cuda, we are all housed under the Department of Entomology and Nematology. We are here in Gainesville. Our lab, specifically the UF Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory, is overseen by Dr. Jamie Ellis. And so we have a little side building that was just recently built in August of 2018. Typically we do tours. Of course, right now everyone's working virtually. We're working from home. But I would love for you all to visit our website at some point to just kind of take a look. We do have a focus on instruction, research, and extension. So I assume that you all are pretty familiar with extension. And so we have plenty of workshops. We hold something called Bee College twice a year. It's going to look a little bit different, you know, moving forward with COVID-19. However, we're still going strong as far as our extension efforts go. All right, so I wanted to introduce you to the murder hornet. This is something that people have probably seen all over the media and probably a little scared of. So I wanted to just real quickly show you, you know, there are actually two different Asian hornets that beekeepers are concerned about. So you can see the one on the left. This is the Asian hornet, which is different from the one on the right over here, which is the Asian giant hornet. The Asian hornet is Vespa velutina or velutina, and the Asian giant hornet is Vespa mandarinia. So the one on the right is the one that you all have kind of been seeing and the one that's really been coined the murder hornet. This one was the one that, you know, we'll talk about it in just a bit, but this is the one that was found in Washington state in 2019. So there are two different hornets that we are potentially concerned about as far as their effects on honeybees. And so I just wanted to clarify, the one on the right is the one that we'll be focusing on today. So both of these are native to Asia. Oops. I don't know what just happened there. Sorry about that. So both of these are native to Asia. They are distributed all over Southeast Asia. And Vespa mandarinia, as you can tell, of course, these pictures side by side is not a true comparison as far as the size of it. But the one on the right is known to be the largest true hornet in the world. I have a couple of pictures that we'll see moving forward, and you all will see how big it actually is. So it can seem a little bit terrifying, but I promise you, I'm going to tell you on every slide, don't panic, everything will be okay. All right, so what's a concern with this Asian giant hornet? What is a concern with this murder hornet that we've been hearing about? So with honeybees, you know, of course, we know that bees provide pollination. Many insects provide pollination to many of our crops. Honeybees play a huge role in agriculture and the economy. Just a couple of, you know, in Florida, they're pollinating, honeybees are taken around basically the United States. And within Florida, we typically bring them to melons, cucurbits, cucumber, and blueberries. So honeybees are pretty important as far as agriculture and the role that they play in the pollination. So some of the concerns that we have with the Asian giant hornet are that they do prey on many insects. So this is really important to note, is that it's not just honeybees. Honeybees are definitely included in their prey. And so, you know, that's definitely a concern that we potentially have. And what they do is they prey on immature and adults as far as their protein goes. So you can kind of see on the right side, the right top image that we have there is a comparison of the size of a honeybee versus the Asian giant hornet. And as you can tell, if you all have seen a honeybee before, the comparison is pretty drastic. So what these Asian giant hornets do is that they do hunt for the honeybees at the entrance of their hives, where they'll basically decapitate them. They'll take them and literally rip their heads off their bodies. And what they'll do is chew it up and take those bees back to their nests to feed their offspring. So that's, you know, it's pretty intense. But when you think about it, it's just basically a mother trying to go back to feed her babies. Many times we won't see the actual hornet as far as beekeepers go and the impacts on honey commercial beekeepers, but they will see the result of the attack. So as I mentioned, you know, because they're decapitating the honeybees, there are lots of dead bodies on the outside of the entrance. So we are not actually sure where they got their name murder hornet from. They potentially got that because it murders and destroys honeybees, not necessarily humans. So that hopefully will calm everyone's nerves a little bit. Of course, with any stinging insect that you're working with, it potentially creates some sort of risk, but of course it just depends. So I wanted to show you this picture on the bottom right here. A lot of people will ask, you know, well, what about the honeybees in Asia? Well, the honeybees in Asia are subspecies Apis cerana, whereas the European honeybees that we have here in the United States is Apis mellifera. The Asian honeybees have actually been able to coexist, and they've kind of co-evolved with this Asian giant hornet. And so what they do as a defense mechanism is they basically ball the hornet, and what they'll do is they'll heat the temperature up to the point where they will kill the individual hornet while not killing themselves. So that's kind of a cool defense mechanism that they have. We're not sure that the European honeybees, that the Apis mellifera managed honeybees that we have here are able to, you know, have that defense mechanism. And so I guess that would be kind of the concern that a lot of beekeepers would potentially have. So what's all the buzz? You know, I think the entomologists here will all just make fun of me because we don't like to be too punny with some of our bee puns. But there was a colony of the Asian giant hornet, the Vespa mandarinia, that was found in British Columbia and Canada in September of 2019. And, you know, later in the fall, there were two specific individual specimens that were found in the northwest part of Washington state. If you have all read the article that came out, the entomologist that found them was Chris Looney, and I'll promote our podcast in just a little bit, but we did interview him for a podcast segment last week. And so he's been a really great resource as far as the whole story of, you know, the Asian giant hornet being found, where it was found, and really, you know, for us to not be too concerned about it. There have been 0 reported sightings and confirmations of the Asian giant hornet in 2020. So there has not at all been any specimens that have been found or have been confirmed or even reported at that So just letting you all know, that's kind of like the one fact I want everyone to start sharing after this talk, is that it hasn't been found yet. So what's currently being done? Chris was telling us, Chris is the entomologist with the Washington State Department of Agriculture, that they do have many trapping programs out in the state. There have been no reports of beekeepers having dead outs associated with the Asian giant hornet. So there haven't been any reports on the effects of this hornet being found, and there are actually no known established colonies that they know of. They did learn some of their trapping methods from Japanese beekeepers. So what they have, you can see this image at the very bottom of these plastic bottles that they use, and they basically use an orange juice rice wine mixture. It's the recipe that they use. And he had kind of joked around saying, you know, during the summertime, it's not going to be a very good smelling bait with orange juice just kind of sitting around, you know, in the summer. So the other thing about the hornet is that it does have the ability to fly up to 5 miles, although they could probably potentially do more damage if they're less than, you know, half a mile away. So just letting you all know that they most likely, we don't know. We have no idea how they actually came over to the United States or to North America. And it's been speculated that they maybe came over with a cargo ship, but there was really no way for them to fly over the ocean from Asia to North America. They're also using infrared cameras to search for nests. And so, you know, with the climate in Washington State, they said it was pretty easy to be able to find colonies if they needed to find them. All right, so there are other wasps that this hornet can be mistaken for. I think, you know, I was kind of joking around saying it's kind of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Like everyone thinks that they have this golden ticket and they think that they have found this hornet. And so we have been receiving a lot of pictures, a lot of calls, and these are the wasps that they can kind of be mistaken for. So we've got the European hornet, cicada killers, yellow jackets, and hornets. And as you can tell, they kind of look pretty obviously different when you look at their pictures. But, you know, when you're outside looking at an insect, you know, if you see a really big wasp and you see a really big hornet, you're probably not gonna really know what it is and kind of assume that it's just a giant stinging insect, right? So we'll talk about, you know, what to do if you think that you have found it. So again, you know, what you found it, you probably found it, maybe, I don't know. The photos, you can take a picture. We definitely don't recommend that you try to find your own specimen or try to get your own sample. You definitely don't want to put yourself in danger. Again, when you're working with stinging insects, they're really there to kind of defend themselves. And so if you're going and trying to bother them, they're probably not going to be happy about that. So take a break, relax, take a deep breath. It's okay. You can see this image. It's kind of intense how big their heads are next to this guy's thumb. So they are no joke as far as what they look like. Please contact your local Department of Agriculture. In our case in Florida, it's the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. They can send out an aviary inspector to help you find a specimen. Really finding a photo is going to be huge. We have someone named Lyle Buss in the Department of Entomology who does insect ID, and he's great, and he's really great at getting back to us very quickly. So if you feel like there's an insect that you don't recognize, you think it's pretty big, take a picture and send it, and feel free to send it our way. All right, so in summary, the Asian giant hornet was found in North America in 2019. We have not seen any specimens in 2020 at all. The way that it came here is still unknown, and some of the research that's going on with it is still relatively new, and so there's still a lot that we don't really quite know about it. Don't panic. The likelihood of it making its way to Florida is pretty slim. Again, because they're so big, their nests are fairly big, and so the Washington State Department of Agriculture is pretty convinced that they're able to find and take care of these colonies. And I think what I'll do is go ahead and, you know, this is being recorded, but I'll go ahead and send Shelly some of these resources, and maybe she can email it out to everybody. All right, and then our lab has different social media pages. So we are very active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a new podcast that we released this year. Again, we did interview the individual who was in the article, Chris Looney, and we just We just posted that today, and anything else that you would need to know would be on our website. This is our email address at the bottom, so if you all have any questions, please feel free to let me know. With that, I'm going to let Dr. Mallinger take over and talk about other bees.
Hi, everyone. Okay. Can you see a screen? Should be the full screen now. All right, great. I'm Dr. Rachel Mallinger, and I lead the Pollinator Ecology Lab at UF. My lab's website is just my name. So if you want to get more information about my lab and about what we do, you can go there. Amy gave a great introduction to the honeybee and to the risks that the Asian giant hornet may or may not pose for the honeybee. And I'm here to talk to you about other bees as related to the Asian giant hornet, but also hopefully to just raise your awareness of all of the bees that we have here in Florida and how those bees differ from honeybees. So I just first want to start by posing the question, what is a bee? What is a hornet? This is a tree from a paper in 2013. I will admit that this may not be the most up-to-date. This is a little bit old now, but I just put it up here to illustrate the relationship among or between all of these different insects. And so at the bottom there, you can see Apoidea. That's the group that has bees as well as some other wasps. And then you see Vespidae closer to the top. That's the group that has hornets. Hornets are a type of wasp. And wasps, bees, and ants are all part of this insect order. So wasps, as well as bees and ants, are related, but bees are more closely related to other things than they are to these hornets. So that's how they're all related. How many bees are there? Amy talked to you about honeybees. As we'll talk about in just a minute here, the honeybee, at least in North America, is just a single species. We only have one species of honeybee in North America. There are over 300 species of bees in Florida. Again, only one of those is the honeybee. Over 4,000 in North America. So on this map, we should include Canada and Mexico. Over 4,000. Now we think closer to 5,000 species of bees in North America. And over 20,000 species of bees in the world. So there are a lot of bees. And that's really the main point that I hope you take away from my little spiel here, is that there are a lot of bees in addition to honeybees. So the honeybee in North America is non-native, and it's just a single species, Apis mellifera. So Amy mentioned Apis cerana. That's a different species of honeybee that lives in Asia, and we don't have that honeybee here in North America. We only have Apis mellifera, single species, not native. It's native to parts of Europe and Asia. So this bee, Apis mellifera, sorry, I think there's some sort of automatic advance going on here. This bee, Apis mellifera, exists in managed colonies as well as feral. So especially here in Florida, there are feral colonies, but primarily it exists in these managed colonies. This bee is social, and its colonies can live for many years. So we call that perennial. Perennial colonies, just like if you have a perennial plant, it's a plant that'll live for many years. And they're generalists, or some will even say super generalists, meaning that they forage on a variety of plants. So what about all these other bees? Again, honeybee, single species, but Florida has over 300 species of bees. They're hard to characterize because they have such a range of sociality, foraging, and nesting behaviors. I'm going to touch on some of these behaviors, and I'll introduce you to some of Florida's bees, but keep in mind that we have to make generalizations given how many species there are. These bees are effective pollinators for many wild plants and crop plants, but they don't produce significant honey. There's a little bit of a caveat there. Bumblebees do produce a honey-like substance, but not in enough quantity for us humans to commercialize and sell. So we need honeybees for honey, but these native bees help with pollination, particularly for wild plants, but also for crop plants. And this is a little diagram that my graduate student James made, highlighting the variation in size of bees, all the way from these small sweat bees to very large carpenter bees. Honeybees and other bees do share some things in common. So they all eat pollen and nectar. So they'll forage on flowers for that pollen and nectar. The nectar is their sugar source. The pollen is what gives them protein. And unfortunately, perhaps for us, they pretty much all sting. There is a large group of stingless bees native to the tropics. We don't have those here in North America. So the bees that we have in Florida generally can sting, although it's only the female bees that will sting you. And for most bees, their stings are pretty mild, much milder than paper wasp stings, for example. I got stung by a paper wasp not long ago and my whole hand swelled up. Most of these bee stings are pretty mild. But other bees differ from honeybees in a few key ways, and I'm going to tie this into the Asian giant hornet at the end. One of the key ways in which they differ is that honeybees are social. So they have this division of both reproduction and labor. Only the queens reproduce. And then there are workers, including foragers and nurse bees. All bees have a unique and distinct role. And these colonies can have up to tens of thousands of bees. Whereas with these other bees, the majority of our species here in Florida and North America are solitary. There's no division of labor or reproduction. Each female is a single mom. That's how I like to describe it. So here you have a solitary bee popping out of the ground. They don't live in large colonies. There are some exceptions to this. Bumblebees are social and some of our sweat bees are social. However, those social bees, bumblebees and sweat bees, they have annual colonies, meaning their colonies only live for 1 year. So even in the case of those social bees, they're short-lived colonies. And again, the majority are solitary, so they nest, forage, and reproduce independently. Whereas honeybees have very long-lived colonies, queens live up to 5 years, and again, there's many workers per colony. This diagram down here just shows the life cycle of a bee. Adults will forage for pollen and nectar. This female here creates a nest, in this case underground, where she puts pollen and nectar. She lays her egg on top of that pollen and nectar. The larva consumes the pollen and nectar, in this case goes through metamorphosis underground, and then pops out as an adult to start her own nest. Or if it's a male, to mate and then die. They die shortly after mating. Another key difference is that honeybees live above ground in managed honeybee houses or hollow crevices in the wild, whereas other bees mostly nest below ground actually, in tunnels like shown here, or in rodent nests, like you can see the bumblebee nest there. Bumblebees often like to nest in abandoned rodent nests. Some do nest above ground in things like wood, stems, reeds, or exposed substrates, but the majority do nest below ground. All right, so I want to end by just pointing out some of Florida's native bees. I'm not going to, again, go through all 300 plus species. These are the main groups of bees. These are functional or taxonomic groups. Bumblebees may be the most familiar to you, or perhaps carpenter bees, but there are a variety of other bees such as sweat bees, mason bees, leafcutter bees, plasterer bees, and mining bees. So I'm just going to point out a few of our common species. Bumblebees, we have 5 species in Florida, and large carpenter bees, we have 2 species in Florida. We also have 3 species of small carpenter bees, which aren't as common. So these pictures here show bumblebees, and you can see the bumblebees are pretty hairy. They have black and yellow hairs. Some of them have a little bit of orange hair. Carpenter bees, on the other hand, are shinier. So one person I was speaking with characterized them as having shiny butts. So if that's the way you want to remember the difference between carpenter bees and bumblebees, carpenter bees have shinier abdomens, less hair on the abdomen compared to bumblebees. But these are our very large bees. So they're pretty large and quite common. In Florida, we also have a number of leafcutter bee species. Shown in the top left is one of the common species that resembles a carpenter bee. So its scientific name actually has the carpenter bee genus in it because it mimics a carpenter bee. At least to us, it mimics a carpenter bee. But this is a leafcutter bee. And then we have a number of other species that are black with white or yellow stripes, as shown in the other 2 pictures. And these bees will cut leaves to make their nests, as shown in the bottom picture. And they have these abundant hairs on the underside of the abdomen where they collect pollen. So that's one way that we can identify them. Another really, I think, beautiful group of bees in Florida are the longhorned bees. So these bees are named for the long antennae in males. The bottom 2 pictures, you can see males with very long antennae. And these males often sleep on flowers or around flowers or on plant stems. So in the evening, if you see a congregation of bees with really long antennae, you're probably seeing male longhorned bees that are hunkering down for the night. Females do not have those long antennae, but they have really chunky legs with a lot of hair. So that's one distinguishing feature that you can see here. And these bees love plants in the sunflower family, things like sunflowers, daisies, coneflowers, black-eyed Susans. So you'll commonly see them on those. And then finally, sweat bees are a very large and diverse and common group of bees in Florida, including the green metallic sweat bees. This group also includes some that are metallic blue. So there's been also in the media, in addition to the Asian giant hornet, there's been a lot of news about the recently rediscovered blue calamintha bee, which is metallic blue. That is a mason bee, not a sweat bee. But there are sweat bees that are real brilliant blue, as well as ones that are brilliant green. So we do have a number of blue, blue-green, and green species in Florida. Other sweat bees, like the one in the top center, are black and white striped. That is a very common species. You'll commonly see it on things like Spanish needle or blanket flower or coreopsis, as shown here. And then we have some in the bottom, you can see a couple species, one that's all gray and one that's gray with an orange abdomen. Those are very common sweat bees, and they're very small, hardly larger than a large ant. And finally, we have cleptoparasitic bees that resemble wasps. So I put these up here just to show you that in addition to wasps that may resemble the Asian giant hornet, there are bees that also may resemble hornets because they generally represent or generally look like wasps. And that is because these bees don't collect their own pollen. They actually lay their eggs in other bees' nests. And so they don't have those hairs that other bees have in which to carry pollen. So these bees are generally hairless. They often have yellow or red coloration, as you can see here. So they may look more wasp-like. And Florida has a number of these species. So does the Asian giant hornet pose a risk for these native bees? Well, there's no evidence of a significant threat. Again, most of these native bees are solitary or live in small annual colonies compared to the perennial colonies of the honeybee. Most of them nest below ground, or some of them may nest in narrow cavities like beetle burrows, so they're harder to get to. But as Amy pointed out, the Asian giant hornet does feed on a variety of insects. So here's a picture of one feeding on a praying mantis. So certainly they could take advantage of other native bees, but given the life cycle of these native bees, there's probably less of a risk. So hopefully you have a greater appreciation for the diversity of bees that we have here in Florida. And I'm gonna turn it back over to Amy and to Dr. Cuda.
Okay, this is kind of interesting. Amy had asked me to, I guess, become part of this, I guess, small team of bee people. And of course, I have really no knowledge or very limited knowledge of bees. And that's what I think I answered when I signed on to this thing, other than the fact that I've been stung a few times. In fact, I remember as a kid, my uncle used to smoke these horrendous cigars. And I put my hand up on a wall, I got stung by a bee, and he took that cigar juice and rubbed it on the sting. It actually helped pretty good. So I guess the nicotine, or maybe it was a spit, I don't know. But anyway, I was trying to figure out, I'm a professor on biological control of invasive plants. And I was trying to figure out what kind of contribution could I make to this webinar today that would be of relevance to the audience. So I thought I'd just kind of look at the invasion curve. A lot of people maybe have heard of this a little bit. Some people may not be that all aware of it, but it's something that we should all be aware of for the following reason. And the fact that is, it gives you some idea of what we need to do to actually control. There we go. Is that better? Can you guys see that better now? Okay. Let me go back here one more time. There. Okay. I guess to start this thing off, I'm going to look at, I guess, or discuss invasive species in general. And I think everyone should really.
It's very small. Your screen is, I don't know if you can make the slide.
Yeah, Jim, so what you can do is go up to where it says display settings. No, go back to slideshow, like just where we were before.
Okay, hold on. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a rookie at this stuff.
Okay, yep.
Oh,
Now
there it is,
go up to display settings. Yep.
I can.
On that, and then say swap.
Okay. That it? That good? All right, good. All right. So I think we all need to know what invasive species are. Most people are aware of it. One of the best definitions was this definition by Harvey and Frank Mazzotti. It came out of an EDIS publication, which I'll provide the reference with at the end. It's basically organisms living outside their native ranges that cause harm to the environment, economy, or human health. Now, I think Amy and Rachel talked about honeybees. Okay, they're not native, obviously, but they're not invasive because they don't really harm the environment, economy. They could cause a little harm to human health if you bother them, but generally they don't. So again, it's kind of an interesting paradox where you have this non-native species that's in somewhat, and like many of our non-native species can be actually beneficial, or basically they cause no problem at all. So with that as a background, let's talk a little bit about the invasion curve. And that basically is a tool for identifying the extent of an invasive species infestation and the cost for controlling it. So I think you'll see in the next slide here, let me go down here somewhere. There we go, yeah. Basically, the invasion curve shows that eradication right here, if you look at this gray or brown column, of an invasive species becomes less likely and control costs increase dramatically as an invasive species increases over time. So here's your time on the x-axis. Here's the area infested, or numbers, I guess, density of the organism, and here are control costs. So if we put this in the context of this Asian giant hornet, well, we're already at this stage right here, eradication. We can't prevent the organism from getting here anymore because now we do know it's in Canada, it was discovered there, and we did find, or at least a colony or specimens were found in Washington State, I guess a few months later. I guess the first find, I guess, was in September in British Columbia, and I think it was December, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, December in Washington State. So we're here now dealing with eradication, all right? So the issue then becomes prevention. As I said, we can't prevent it from coming in here, at least in North America. But we can probably, and I think most likely, eradicate this particular organism by implementing what they currently are doing, early detection and rapid response, or EDRR. And I guess they're getting fairly aggressive with this phenomenon of EDRR, and they have to be, because they have to coordinate a lot of resources. Because I think the best way of looking at all this, at least in my view, is looking at it like cancer. When you get a cancer diagnosis early on, you have a really great chance of basically getting a handle on it and eliminating it, or at least keep it from causing any serious problems. But you have a very short window to do that. That's what I think they're dealing with here with this Asian giant hornet. They know it's in the area, so they've got a very short time to get a handle on it and basically eradicate it before it really starts to reproduce in huge numbers and then begin to spread, where you get into the containment phase. Now, I know they're doing a lot of traps and some other things. I think I also heard somewhere they're trying to put little transmitters on some of the adults, I guess some of the large adults, and I guess they go back to the colony and they can track them going back to the colony. And once they find the colony, then they can go in there and eliminate it. So that's where we're at right now, eradication. And I think it's probably going to be successful because it's, for one thing, it's a fairly large organism, and I think that's a good thing. They'll be able to get a handle on it if they put the effort into it, and it's going to take a concerted effort by a lot of entities. Well, let's suppose they're not successful, and now we're in a situation where you have to contain the spread of an exotic species. Let's say it spreads through Washington State, gets down into the western United States, and you can see here now that the number, the density is going to be increasing, and it's going to be spreading, which means now control costs are going to be more substantial. And hopefully we don't want to get to that point with this particular organism, because control costs are going to be substantial. And management, I guess, of hives is going to be an issue now, because the hornets could hopefully, or not hopefully, but could potentially cause some serious problems to the honeybee industry as well. Finally, this is where we don't want to see. This is where we are with a lot of our invasive species here in Florida. This is where we currently are with our Wuhan virus, or COVID-19, if you want to call it. we're at a situation now where the thing is spread so much, we're now in resource protection and long-term management. And what we're doing now, in fact, I'm in my office today, and most of you guys are at home, but I'm considered an essential employee because I have to maintain some stuff at the lab here. But social distancing we're doing, obviously. The masks, I have to wear a mask when I go out in the hallway to try to minimize any sort of spread. But all of us realize that the only way we're going to get a handle on this is when that vaccine or vaccines are produced. Now, I'm not sure what's going to happen if we get a situation where this giant hornet can get to the point where it's at this level. Certainly could be obviously a serious, serious problem. And we're not going to get there if, in fact, things are done really quite well early on. So key references, if you're not familiar with the invasive species curve, it's something you should be aware of because it helps you understand this problem fairly well. And I'd also want to point out a paper that's just been published, or it's in press right now in the Journal of Extension. It should be published fairly shortly. And I'm a co-author with several of us from the Invasive Species Council. And basically, it has a lot of information on invasive species terminology and how to not misuse a lot of the terms that are out there. So hopefully that'll provide a nice resource for you guys as well. I think that's all I have. So I guess I need to turn it back to, needs to go back to Shelly. How do we get back there? Stop share? No, how do I do this? How do I get out?
Yeah, just stop sharing your screen, or
There
I
we
can
go.
actually probably stop share.
There we
for you.
go.
So yeah, we have we have 15 minutes for questions. There's been a couple in the chat only already, but I will read them. So one was from the first presentation, but I mean, anyone can answer it that I guess feels they should. It was, how does it compare in size? How does the hornet compare in size and niche to the cicada killer, which would they compete? Sorry.
Yeah, so from what I know, the Asian giant hornet has the potential to be up to 3 inches long. As far as cicada killers go, cicada killers are only out to kill cicadas. So, you know, if they were to compete, it would be over cicadas and not necessarily honeybees. As far as competition, what I've heard with the Asian giant hornet is that they're pretty aggressive. So when they are competing for food sources, they're usually able to outcompete other insects that are going in for the same prey. That's, you know, again, the research is still kind of new. I am no hornet expert, so I should have prefaced with that, but now you all know my secret. But I have learned a lot about it in the past couple of weeks with talking to different media sources. So yeah, as far as competition, they're pretty fierce. I think there were a couple, I can go through the other couple and kind of look through. How many Asian giant hornets have been found in Washington state? So there were 2 specimens that were found in 2 different locations. They are both not alive. So those are the only 2 that had been reported. I wanted to mention that I didn't mention earlier was actually the importance of everyone's involvement and notifying someone if you do find something that looks a little strange. I'm pretty sure Chris, the entomologist that was speaking to us, said that the first Asian giant hornet that was found on someone's front porch. I mean, they were just on their porch outside. It wasn't a beekeeper. They didn't really even know if there were any honeybee colonies, you know, close by. And so they had just looked down and saw this dead specimen actually on the front of their patio. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So it's really important that everyone, you know, definitely report something if they feel like they see it. Rachel, everyone wants to hear about your Florida native insects talk in the future. And I know you do lots of different extension workshops.
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning a little bit more, but also you like to garden or are interested in gardening, I didn't bring it up because it's a little more garden focused than bee focused, but we have a Gardening for Pollinators fully online extension course that's focused on gardening for bees and butterflies. And it does include some biology, natural history, and identification of bees, as well as butterflies, and then a whole bunch of information on gardening. So you can check that out. It's under the UF IFAS Extension online course catalog. And yeah, otherwise, you know, my lab's happy to come out and talk to you and your group.
Cool. Let's see. Thanks, Rachel. Are there any natural predators that could help to control the Asian hornet? I don't know of any natural predators that they have. It's actually kind of funny. I don't know if you all saw, but there were plenty of memes that were out there between COVID-19 and the murder hornet story. And, you know, someone had posted this video of, I think it was a praying mantis feeding on the Asian giant hornet. And, you know, what I thought was kind of ironic was that everyone was scared of this so-called murder hornet, but they're not scared of whatever is attacking the murder hornet. You know, that's what I'd be scared of, I think. So that was kind of interesting to me. But either way, if Dr. Cuda or Mallinger, if you guys know of any natural predators, I'm not sure.
This is Jim Cuda. I'm not sure right now what would be. Possibly maybe some small rodents or something, or some small mammals that, because it's a pretty good size insect. So I doubt if lizards, generally lizards are insectivores, but you have to be a pretty good sized lizard. Maybe something like this invasive tegu that's now around here could, you know, but I'm not sure what they're going to, you know, what's up in Western United States. I know they have a fairly good rodent population up there. I know that was a big issue for some of the invasive, I guess, snapweeds I was working on a few years ago. So I know they have a fairly good rodent population, so perhaps that could be, but they'd be general predators.
Sure.
I think if in fact this thing does become established, they're going to have to do some serious overseas exploration for some kind of parasitoid or some sort of organism that's specific to that particular wasp. But gosh, we don't want to ever get to that point where we're going to have to do that. We want this, you know, we want that EDRR to be the best way to go here.
Yeah, some of the beekeepers I know in Asia will actually sit outside their honeybee colonies with a tennis racket, and that's how big they are. I mean, you can see them and they'll just basically whack them down so that they're not able to get to the colonies. And so it's pretty intense. You know, it's kind of creative to see what people have come up with, just trying to keep it out. But again, they've coexisted with them in Asia, and you know, somehow they're able to coexist fairly decently, I would say. All right, so the next question is, I think for you, Dr. Mallinger, I'm regularly seeing dead bees on the beach almost daily. I think they may be a sweat bee. Why would there be so many dead bees on the beach?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. There certainly are bees that live in sand dunes adjacent to beaches and forage on flowers in those areas. And it is important to keep in mind that, you know, bees have a natural life cycle, especially these solitary bees. The majority of our bees are solitary. As adults, they don't live for very long, a few weeks to a few months. So some observations of dead bees is not, you know, that's not alarming. They're going to die at some point. If you see a lot of what looks to be the same species, that's maybe a little more alarming. If it is a sweat bee, you know, these would be slender, kind of metallic bees, possibly gray, black, blue, green. So, you know, if you do see large numbers of what looks like the same species, take a picture and send it in. If you see a bee here and there that has died, adult bees generally don't live very long as adults. They have a pretty short foraging period. I have had a couple other similar kind of mysterious dead bee emails that we haven't been able to figure out. And I do wonder if some of it could be related to how dry it's been, at least in much of Florida. There's a woman who has a pool and has noticed dead bees around there. So possibly bees drinking from sources of water that are contaminated and dying, if they're searching for water since it's been so dry, not able to drink in pools of water that they would otherwise have available to them. So I don't know the answer to your question. There was another question below that about bees nesting in sand. And yes, there are a number of bees, particularly ones that are black and white striped, that do nest below ground. That could be a variety of things. There are black and white striped sweat bees that nest below ground. The longhorned bees also nest below ground and are black and white striped. And there are even some leafcutter bees that are black and white striped that nest below ground. A lab member of mine got a great video of a bee carrying a leaf that she had just cut, taking it down into the ground where she's going to use that leaf to build her nest. So a number of bees nest below ground. So if you see a ground nest, not always an ant or a wasp or something, you know, quote unquote bad, could be a friendly bee.
Great. Okay, how likely is this in Florida? I think that is a question on how likely is the Asian giant hornet going to be in Florida. We're not too worried about it. Again, all the Department of Agriculture throughout the United States are all working together to make sure that they are working on monitoring for the species. Who should we contact if you see one? So you should definitely contact the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. You could just put in FDAX and murder hornet. I'm sure it would come up. They basically have a page where you can upload photos and let them know, and not just for insects, but also invasive plants. So they have an entire, invasive species page. The next question says, hasn't there been an uptick in the number of other bees being killed because everyone has been panicking about these hornets thanks to extensive? Yeah, so Dr. Mallinger is kind of nodding her head yes right now, and probably, I mean, we have received a lot of photos from people who think they have found it, and they basically just knock these insects down. And, again, what, Dr. Cuda and Dr. Mallinger had said was most of the insects that we have are either neutral or they just coexist or they're beneficial. Typically, there's that tiny percentage, the 1% that really are doing harm. So I think that's maybe a message that we need to be sending out to everybody as well, is that, we do have lots of beneficial insects. All right, we needed a link for gardening for pollinators. So maybe Dr. Mallinger
I did add that. So if you scroll down.
Okay, there it is.
It is $15. Someone asked about the cost, $15 enrollment. It's co-taught by me and Dr. Jarrett Daniels, butterfly expert at the museum, and then a county extension agent, Wayne Hobbs, who does the gardening modules.
Oh, Wayne, he's awesome. Okay, let's see. Going down. So Shelly asked, if no new hornets have been found in 2020, why was it in such big news recently? So the funny thing about it is we actually knew about this. There was a press release that came out when it was found in British Columbia last fall. So we were pretty well aware of it, and nobody had really questioned it. And it actually had come out on the news. It just wasn't, coined the murder hornet. So maybe we all just saw, this insect and said, okay, well, something was found here. I think, and I'm not 100% sure about this, so shouldn't say it, but I'll say it anyway. I think what had happened was because Washington State is kind of going through, the process of going from spring to summer, their climate's changing a little bit. And so because they've been doing monitoring and trapping efforts, there's not much to see during the winter time up there. So I think because they're going through season transitions, it's probably, come to people's attention. So definitely the murder hornet helps with that as far as spreading the news. And so it's kind of like we have a love-hate relationship with it being called the murder hornet. Let's see. Oh man, okay. Have we had any other areas that we've seen these hornets? So no, they have not been seen anywhere else outside of where they were found in Washington. And then we would have to do a controlled environment to test, and more tests before releasing a predator that could present more problems. So I think Dr. Cuda might be able to answer that one as far as the process goes of, doing biological control research on invasive species.
Yeah, and it is. It's kind of interesting, though. I work in the area of biological control of weeds, and there is a very formal process that you have to go through to develop a test plant list. That test plant list has to be reviewed by the federal government, by what's called the Interagency Technical Advisory Group for Biological Control, and they review your test plant list. You get approval on it. They may suggest certain species, particularly things like that are threatened or endangered plant species that would have to be tested. But it's kind of interesting. That's the weed biocontrol. The insect biocontrol folks never had a formal process in place. So, and again, they've taken a lot of heat over the years because they've released quite a few what are called generalist parasites or predators. And of course, that's caused a problem, like thing like Harmonia. The Harmonia ladybird beetle is a generalist one. And now certain times of the year, that thing's found all over the place in people's houses. It's become a huge pest. But I know, given what we've done in weed biocontrol with this formal process, many of the researchers that I've worked with over the years, and particularly people like my former colleague here, Dr. Howard Frank, they started doing very specific host range tests. They would test other insects to see if, in fact, they would be attacked by, let's say, a potential parasite that they would study in a quarantine environment before getting approvals. And I think APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, was doing some sort of kind of informal review of this particular screening process. But again, it's not as formalized with insect biocontrol agents as it is with weed biocontrol agents. It's very formalized.
I just have a couple minutes left. I want to launch the poll really quick. If everyone can just fill us out, it's just 4 questions. It's just, you know, did you learn anything or not, basically. We can keep answering questions for the next couple minutes, but I just wanted to launch this before people started leaving the call. So
there was, sorry, Shelly,
go ahead.
There was a question about the blue bee, so I thought I would answer that. So that's the blue calamintha bee that was found by Chase Kimmel. He's a postdoc in Dr. Jarrett Daniels' lab, and it had not been seen since 2016. So there was some concern that it was endangered, extinct. Interestingly, it was only first identified in 2011. So we've only known about it for 9 years, but then we didn't see it for 4 years. So the question was if there's anything being done about it. Yeah, so that bee is a specialist, or at least thought to be a specialist of a particular plant, Asch's calamint, that grows in the Florida scrub habitat in the Lake Wales Ridge. So probably the best thing that can be done is protecting that Lake Wales Ridge scrub habitat and protecting this particular plant. I don't know much about that plant's fire requirements, for example. A lot of these plants are very fire sensitive, fire dependent. But you know, that's really what can be done for that particular bee.
So I want to thank everyone for joining today. We had a pretty good turnout. It looks like we had close to 80 people that ended up joining. And again, we're going to keep doing these programs. I did record this program, and I will be also sending out the resources that Amy mentioned to everyone, as well as a link to where you can review the program if you would like. I'll show you really quick. I am posting on IFAS blogs. I have a blog on there, Nature Knowledge Webinar, and I'll give you the link to that as well. And that's where I'm posting both upcoming topics and webinars, and also links to the past webinars that have already been recorded. So the one from last month with Dr. Lisa Krimsky and cyanobacteria is up there if you wanted to review that one, or if you missed that one. That was very interesting. So that's all I have. I don't know if any of the speakers had anything last minute things to say, but thank you all for joining me. This was a really interesting, like, little smattering of tidbits, I think, that I found very interesting. So I appreciate you joining us.